Silence had never been something Ethan truly valued. He grew up in a noisy neighborhood where car horns blared, children shouted, and televisions from neighboring houses created a constant hum. Even in his own home, there was always chatter, arguments, or the background noise of music. Ethan had become so used to it that silence felt unnatural, almost uncomfortable. Whenever he found himself in a quiet space, he would quickly reach for his phone, play a song, or call a friend just to fill the void. He thought silence was emptiness, a lack of life. But he didn't yet know that silence had the power to change everything. Ethan was in his late 20s working in a busy corporate job. His days were filled with endless meetings, constant notifications, and the pressure of deadlines. He would return home exhausted, yet instead of resting, he drowned his fatigue with loud entertainment. His mind was restless, and his heart carried a heaviness he couldn't explain. He felt lost, though he never admitted it aloud. His success looked good on the outside, but inside, he was breaking. One day, after an especially stressful week, Ethan received an invitation from a colleague to join a weekend retreat in the mountains. The retreat promised peace, meditation, and time away from devices. Initially, Ethan laughed at the idea. Me? Sit quietly and meditate? That's impossible, he scoffed. But something deep inside him whispered that maybe it was worth trying. With no better plan, he reluctantly agreed. The retreat center was nestled among tall pine trees, with crisp mountain air and a river flowing nearby. From the moment Ethan arrived, he was asked to surrender his phone, watch, and any distractions. The program demanded silence. No talking to others, no music, no writing, just complete stillness with oneself. Ethan felt uneasy. The first night, as he lay in his cabin, the silence felt suffocating. He could hear the creaking of wood, the wind rustling leaves, and even the sound of his own heartbeat. He tossed and turned, restless, craving the comfort of noise. By the second day, something began to shift. Sitting by the river, Ethan watched the water flow. He noticed the rhythmic splash of ripples against rocks and the gentle sway of branches above. Without the constant interference of noise, his mind slowly began to quiet. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing anywhere, wasn't checking messages, wasn't pretending to be strong. He simply sat in silence, observing. His thoughts began to untangle themselves and memories resurfaced. Memories of childhood dreams, laughter, and even old wounds he had buried under layers of busyness. At one point, Ethan remembered how, as a child, he wanted to become a writer. He used to scribble stories in his notebook, but life's pressures and society's expectations had pushed him into a career that drained him. He realized he had been running from silence because silence forced him to face the truth. He was living a life that wasn't his own. The third day was the hardest yet the most powerful. During meditation, a flood of emotions overwhelmed him. He cried silently, tears rolling down his cheeks as if years of pain were being released in that quiet space. In silence, he finally confronted the loneliness he had carried inside. But instead of crushing him, the silence embraced him like an old friend, allowing him to breathe freely. For the first time, he felt light. By the end of the retreat, Ethan was no longer the same man who had walked in. He had discovered that silence wasn't emptiness, it was fullness. It was in silence that he heard his inner voice, the one drowned out for years by noise. He realized that peace wasn't something he had to chase outside. It was always within him, waiting to be heard. When Ethan returned to the city, life around him hadn't changed. The traffic still roared, phones still buzzed, people still shouted. But inside Ethan, everything was different. He no longer feared silence, instead he sought it daily. He carved out moments to sit quietly, reflect, and reconnect with himself. His work stress no longer consumed him because silence had given him clarity. He even began writing again, pouring his thoughts and feelings into words. His writing soon inspired others, and people around him noticed the calm confidence he now carried. Ethan's life transformed because he allowed silence to teach him what noise never could. Silence revealed the truth about who he was and what truly mattered. It healed him, guided him, and gave him the courage to change direction, He realized that most people fear silence because it strips away distractions and forces them to face their real selves. But in reality, silence is not the absence of life. It is the presence of life in its purest form. Silence became his teacher, his healer, and his greatest source of strength. And so Ethan began sharing his story, reminding others that sometimes the most powerful transformation begins not in action, but in stillness. Because when you finally embrace silence, you begin to hear the voice that can change your life forever, the voice within.